Are we Russia's next target?
We are Russia's next target. And we are already in harm's way. I fear that too many are quietly complacent. Too many don't feel the urgency. And too many believe that time is on our side. It is not.
That's the stark warning from NATO chief Mark Rutte coming after a frantic week of diplomacy with Ukraine and its European allies rushing a new peace deal proposal to the Trump administration. The US president has branded European leaders weak and signalled the US could step back from defending the continent, raising serious questions about whether America can still be relied upon. And in Moscow, the Kremlin has gone further, warning that British troops operating in Ukraine would be considered legitimate targets. So tonight, we're asking, are we actually heading to war with Russia? Going head-to-head on this now, we have former British Army spokesperson Major Mike Shearer and former Conservative MP, British Army officer and author Bob Seeley joining us. Thank you very much for joining us. So let's start with Bob. How are things looking for the safety of this nation?
Sorry, Alex, in what sense are you saying? Are you saying that do we consider ourselves at war with Russia? If that's the question, the answer is no. Since 2007, the Russians and President Putin specifically has considered himself in conflict with the West in terms of values, in terms of information, etc. And that conflict and that idea of conflict has steadily got worse.
OK. And Mike, does that make you feel any better about the situation?
No. Look, the Secretary General of NATO is spot on. Now, it hurts me to say this, the only honest broker in this is Putin. Putin has been clear all the while about what his intentions are. And Bob, I remember having a sensible argument with you on the Isle of Wight about 5 years ago, there or thereabout, maybe a bit longer, with Kim Sengupta, poor Kim of The Independent, who has passed away. And Kim and I were arguing the point that that Putin was sharpening his weaponry, and you weren't having it at all. But here we are today, and he is producing something like 100 tanks a month. 100 tanks a month. The United Kingdom of 147. Europe is in disarray. I think we have to accept the Pax Americana, the notion that we could rely on our American cousins. We have to assume, not necessarily presume, but assume that that's no longer there. Europe really needs to start spending money now. We heard this, the Defence Secretary just a day or so ago saying that we were delivering on the SDR. Look, I've spoken with Lord Robertson, the co-author of the SDR, and I challenged him in June or July. And I said, look, this isn't going to be fully operationalised until 9 years' time. What do we do about this? And in fairness to Lord Robertson, he recognised this and said, we can push and compress the whole SDR forward if we need to. He has been on his feet in the House of Lords, and he has said quite clearly that the United Kingdom is uninsured. We do not have the wherewithal to defend our islands.
We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code, an account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just living credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponize against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
Bob, is that a position you want to be in? Is there not a wager issue?
I'm not sure I disagree with anything that's just been said, so I'm not quite sure why the argument's being created. I mean, yeah, are we at war with Russia? No. Are we going to be at war with Russia? We don't know. But what we do know is that if you don't, let me finish, please. If you don't deter, you make war more likely. Putin considers himself in conflict with Britain and the Western world. There is a difference between being in conflict, that's economic and values and information and political warfare, in his new hybrid ideas of total war, integrated war, that I talk about in my book called The New Total War. That is different from a traditional idea of warfare. So we have to actually divide up these things, and we actually have to give some clear definitions to them. We are not at war with Russia. Russia considers itself to be in conflict with the West, and we reduce the likelihood of actual war breaking out if we deter, and we are not deterring enough. So I don't disagree particularly with what you're saying, but I think we need a little bit more clarity in what we're talking about.
Okay, maybe I'm framing the question wrong, and it's not to ask, do we think we're going to be in war with Russia? Maybe the question should be more about, do they predict they'll be at war with us? They have an economy that's been tweaked to become a war economy. Is that not time to panic more?
Yeah, for sure.
If I may on this, Putin is being quite responsible here. Putin is sending us all the signals. He is building an armory. And what Putin is trying to do is put a conventional military wedge between the West and nuclear war. We need to recognize this. We need to put an equal conventional military wedge between us and Putin. Then there will be a standoff. The best we can hope for there is a Cold War. And we sit it out until there are new leadership at the strategic level, at the very top of Russia and likely the West, and it will dissipate. But we need to give Putin that conventional warfare option. Otherwise, all we have are buttons, and that's not a good place to be in.
Are we all in agreement that it's time now to change our opinion on whether we should basically hide behind America? Bob, I should go to you on this.
Look, we shouldn't have been hiding behind America, full stop. Europe is a rich continent. We should have been paying our own way. And ever since Putin decided in this new Cold War and this path of conflict, which he decided back in a speech he made in 2007, we should have carefully rebuilt. Not only in our conventional capacity, but how we deal with more hybrid threats, be it espionage, political warfare, information warfare, the espionage work around all the pipelines and the internet cables that connect us to the rest of the world. So the fact that we're coming this late in a bit of a panic is entirely due to our lack of intelligent preparation, because our political classes and indeed our leadership in this country and indeed Europe did not want to accept what was happening when Putin attacked Georgia, when he attacked Ukraine in 2014. So this is in part because of our inability to plan and see the world for what it was and for actually making sensible decisions. So we're now catching up in a bit of a panic. When it comes to rebuilding Putin's armory, he's partly doing that to fight his war in Ukraine, but he's also partly modernizing, using warfare to modernize his armed forces, and very specifically to become one of the world leaders in drone warfare, which is, in both in theory and practice, changing ground warfare. And NATO countries, absolutely true to say, are years behind on this, and we have to catch up, because we're not going to deter any political or military adventurism from Putin if we are seen to be weak, if we are seen to be militarily behind in our development. And we need to play catch up, and we need to do it fast, because we are more likely to prevent the possibility of war if we deter properly.
Bob, can I ask you, as a former Conservative MP, would you have faith in a Labour government, or this Labour government's ability to take this fight to Putin?
I mean, the simple answer is no. The slightly more complex answer is I think the defence team in Labour is either the best or the least bad team out of all the ministerial departments. I think John Healey is a competent Minister of Defence, and I think Al Cairns is a very, very good quality minister who's had a superb military record. But the problem is that they have announced the largest increase of defence funding, and they simply haven't delivered on that. And in order to save Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' jobs, they are funneling any money that could have gone into defence into welfare expenditure as well. So the problem is that the government is talking about the likelihood of war, but is not actually taking even its own fears seriously, because they're not actually investing in the armed forces in the years and months before potential crises may occur.
And Mike, what do you think we should be doing?
Well, I think Bob is spot on there. And I think that we have to take the money from wherever it needs to come from. I mean, every government department, if need be. None of these departments will matter if in the fullness of time we're all speaking Russian. This is not alarmist. I said 2 years ago on GB News that I encouraged NATO to up its spending. For example, in 1960, so what's that, 15 years or so after the Second World War, this country was still spending 7% of GDP on defence. That's because those that were living at that time, through all the hardship of going through rationing, etc., they all knew the cost of freedom. The trouble is that consecutive governments since 1991 has seen the spend on the military as a liability. The spend on the military is not, and defence in general, is not a liability. It's an investment. And we find ourselves in the position today because we haven't kept up. We need to reconstitute many of our old armoured infantry regiments. We need to throw a lot of money at defence and buy tanks, buy guns. We've got a fleet that isn't worth that much. Our RAF, or forgive the pun, living on a wing and a prayer. And Putin has seen this. Putin can see the dire strait, the woeful state of the lack of preparedness that NATO in Europe is at. We need to spend money now.